Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2, where it's finally time for some Canadians to take on the platoon patrol. Specifically, the Canadian Mechanized Rifles are up in their LAVs, links to the quick guide to them and their dismounts down below. As always, our platoon is starting from a randomly determined entry point and looking for a reinforced squad of US Marines in one of originally 5 but now 4 locations on our map. This time round I rolled up a 2, so the Canadians are starting on the eastern map edge. After going to check out the Bravo hilltop, I sent the platoon down towards Charlie and Echo to get eyes on those 2 objectives, and one of the dismounted infantry teams came under fire from Alpha. That's some very optimistic fire from the Marines. They've got the elevation to see because they're up near the top of the Alpha forward slope, but it's still over 700 meters away. They do actually manage to score a lucky hit and inflict a casualty on second section. This is an interesting change of pace. I don't think we've made contact at this kind of distance before. It's not much of a problem for the 25mm Bushmasters on the LAVs. They can get stuck in while I figure out what to do. Finding the enemy from this central position, I basically have 3 options for attacking Alpha. I can do what I did with the CV90 platoon and take a direct approach, crossing at Charlie and moving up through the orchard. I can disengage here, go down the highway and around Delta to come up on the far left and attack over the open ground on that flank. Or I could go right and roll up Alpha from that side. I'm not quite sure which option to pick, but I start by getting a base of fire set up in between the Charlie Woods and the stream. I have a bit of a fire corridor here that I can take advantage of. This is, of course, a 2-way range though, and the Marines quickly start to ping rounds off the opened up LAVs. Again, this is the enemy demonstrating why you should hold fire until you're in effective range, because all I need to do is button up my vehicles and start blasting away at the new contact icons that I've got. There's definitely one infantry team in the far corner of the Alpha orchard, and as the platoon HQ vehicle settles into a hull down position near the stream on my right, it starts attracting anti-tank rockets. One of the Marines' small teams is on the roof of building A4. The LAVs engage it automatically, but that flat trajectory contact fused HEI from the Bushmasters isn't super effective here, and the Marines get more s'mores off that I'm happy about before I get a chance to intervene. I get the platoon HQ LAV to pop smoke at the start of the next turn and roll it back to turret down next to the stream before kicking out the platoon leader and the weapons squad. I want to get that 60mm mortar dropping HE on the Marine infested rooftops as soon as I can. I still haven't decided which way to go. For now I'm intent on exploiting this field of fire. I have targets, return fire is thus far ineffective, and while my own fire doesn't look like it's doing a lot, I have something to chew on. I still need to close though, both to find more targets and to advance to a point where my own fire is more effective. Second section and their LAV don't have good line of sight where they are, so I send them up onto the highway where they can dismount, cross the ditch and get into the Charlie orchard. From there they should be screened from the objective compound itself and get eyes onto the right side of the Alpha slope. They don't see much, but a few minutes later the second small team gets spotted on top of building A5. That makes a direct approach even less attractive than it was before. At least my firepower is beginning to tell. The mortar seems sadly inaccurate and it never manages to hit the rooftops, but the 25mm cannons eventually start to collapse the A4 and A5 roofs through sheer persistence. That's fine, the LAVs have got plenty of ammunition. I'm not sure if the s'mores have been neutralised or they've just fallen back to the ground floor though, so I still want to avoid their field of fire. Second section hasn't spotted anything in the right side of the Alpha slope, so I decide to pull first and third out of the firing line, swing out right on the right, and hit that flank. With the 2 other LAVs providing some oblique fire support, I should be able to roll up Alpha from the right. It takes a few minutes to bring first and third around. They dismount and cross the highway ditch to get to the edge of the orchard, a move which fails to draw any fire and encourages me to bring their LAVs up for close support. It's been pretty quiet since these small rooftops got smacked around. I'm not sure if that's because I've dealt with all the contacts in view, or because I've removed targets for them to engage. Second section is quietly moving through the fields and farmhouses beneath the slope to try and spot targets, while the HQ team and weapon squad lurk in their support by fire position. The mortar is out of ammunition now. It used up all the HE targeting the s'mores, and I splurged the 4 smoke rounds to cover 1st and 3rd's LAVs as they cross the bridge on the right. 1st is carefully advancing across the middle of the Alpha slope, paralleled by 3rd moving along the road. They're the ones who regain contact. The Marines in the far corner of the Orc should pop up again. 3rd's A-team engage, but behind them their LAV has spotted another contact just to the right of the Alpha compound. The LAV engages, hitting the trees above 3A and taking the section leader out with friendly fire. That at least seems to neutralise the further contact, and I can get on with manoeuvring onto the one in the corner. First section is going to be the assault element here, so they start to move right, trailed by their LAV, but I want 3rd's B-team into position to support as well. As they dash across a path in the orchard, they take a near miss from a 40mm grenade. There's a 3rd team of Marines hidden in the undergrowth at the bottom of the slope. Even as one of them is firing grenades at 3B, the rest of those Marines engage 2nd section, which has gone up onto one of the farm roofs to get a better view. They quickly take out 3 of the Canadians and force them back downstairs. At least 2nd's LAV looks like it's snuffed out the enemy in the corner of the orchard, which frees me up to deal with the awkward team at the bottom of the slope. 1st and 3rd pivot to dealing with them, bringing their LAVs into action, and soon the Marine position is drowned in 25mm HE shells and a few Carl Gustav rounds from 1st. After a couple of turns, I cease fire and the Marines don't give anything back. It takes a few minutes to edge in and check, but by now all the Marines are done. After confirming all 3 rifle teams on the HQ are out of the fight in the orchard, I send 3A into the compound, touching the objective and getting eyes on both dead s'more teams. That makes it time to cease fire. The Canadian mech sustained 5 casualties in total, giving them a total score of 946. As always, it's an arbitrary metric, but I think their position below the Panzer Grenadiers and above the Striker infantry makes a lot of sense. That said, they didn't have a fantastic approach. We had a kind of 2-stage battle here. First, the LAVs engaged from the base of fire near Charlie and shut down what contacts they could spot, a couple of Marine rifle teams up on the slope and the 2 small teams on the Alpha rooftops. After servicing those targets for a while, the incoming pot shots stopped and the contacts disappeared. Whether that was because everything visible had been neutralised, or the Marines stopped giving their positions away by shooting is hard to tell. I was definitely starting to manoeuvre the rifle sections, 2nd going left and 1st and 3rd going right, and had by then buttoned up and removed all the things for the enemy to engage. On the other hand, the small teams were definitely knocked out around this time, so I guess we could be dealing with a mix. In the 2nd phase of the battle, the infantry were closing in on the Alpha slope, but because the Canadians had lost contact, they had to make it again, this time at much shorter range with exposed dismounts. That explains most of the casualties. Of the 5, 2nd section suffered 3 of them popping up onto the roof of one of the farms and getting shot to pieces by the Marines at the base of the slope. This is just a characteristic of clearing out enemy teams in dense terrain that we've seen so many times before. They might not last long once they've been revealed, but they can usually do some damage before they go down. I'm undecided as to whether it was a good idea to get up on those rooftops. 2nd couldn't see much from ground level, and I was hoping to get their fire going at right angles to the attack through the slope to supplement the LAVs. Maybe 2nd having moved up to that point without any sign of resistance lulled me into a false sense of security. The other 2 casualties were pretty much incidental. The first was also from 2nd section when they got engaged at 700 meters at the very start of the contact. The other was 1st section's leader who got caught by a tree burst courtesy of the LAV behind them. Obviously that kind of thing is always a possibility when you've got your dismounts out ahead of your vehicles. I didn't think the LAV would be able to spot and engage through the trees. Speaking of the LAVs, I think we have a really interesting potential point of comparison here. The LAVs are armed with the same 25mm Bushmaster cannon as the Bradleys, so I think this is the first time we have 2 platoon patrol runs where the vehicles are armed with the same principal weapon. This Canadian run was obviously not as smooth as the American mech run, but I'm not sure it's that fair to compare them. The Bradleys were super effective, sure, but they also opened their engagement at much closer range, and took out the S'mores very quickly using their tow missiles, which, combined with the terrain, immediately gave them a lot of space to maneuver. The LABs, on the other hand, opened proceedings from about twice as far, engaged the Marine anti-tank teams much less decisively, and as a result, it wasn't clear until the very end whether the small teams were still in the fight. That meant I had to be much more cautious with the Canadians. One of the reasons for choosing to attack Alpha from the right was that the dense undergrowth on the slope would mask my advance from the S'mores. On the other hand, the enemy rifle teams and Platoon HQ were set up on the forward slope of Alpha, which meant that the LRVs could engage them pretty easily. I think it's very telling that the only Marine rifle team that gave me problems was at the bottom of the slope, hidden in some undergrowth behind a wall where my base of fire couldn't draw a line of sight. That meant the infantry had to close in to finish the job, and that raises the possibility of casualties. Would the Bradleys have performed much better? Hard to say, though with their tows and explosive reactive armour I might have been more confident attacking from the left and exploiting all that open ground over there. I would expect them to spot better as well. The Bradley has an independent thermal imager for the commander, which is not only a step above the fixed thermals on the LABs, but can always be exploited because there's a set 2-man turret crew. The commander seat in the LAB is taken up by the dismounts. Once they're out and about, they lose the spotting advantage that it gives. It's also interesting to compare the LABs to the CB90s, who are the only platoon to attack Alpha thus far. The CB90s obviously did a fantastic job, but a lot of that was down to their air-bursting 40mm rounds, and they had used most of those up by the end. The LAB's 25mm cannon is less impressive, and because it's smaller there's less space in the warhead to do fancy things with fuses, but you can carry an awful lot more ammunition. None of the LABs were even close to running out of 25mm HEI. There's definitely some tension there between more effective lower capacity ammo and less effective higher capacity ammo. Given how fast things can go sideways on the modern battlefield and how important it is to minimise exposure, I suspect the 40mm cannon on the CB90 is a better choice. It gets let down in combat mission by the way the Tech AI fires very long bursts. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves there. This was a solid run by the Canadian mech. No major surprises, though I was a little bit disappointed in the mortar. Now that we've seen some Canadians, every nation in Shock Force 2 has now been represented in the platoon patrol. We've still got 5 platoons left though. Next up is one of the 3 remaining in Group 6, Syrian Reserve Infantry and BTR-60 PBs, more Canadians, this time in Nyala MRAPs, and Dutch mechanised in YPR-765s. I fear for the Syrians and the Canadians, I think they'll both have a hard time. The Dutch in YPRs should do good. As always, we will get round to everyone, but it'll be fun to see who you guys pick next. I'll leave a link to the poll down below when that goes live. In the meantime, if you'd like to see these videos early and support the channel, you can do so via Patreon and YouTube memberships. Whether you do or not, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.